So in the last couple of videos, we looked at we put a lot of emphasis on the idea of Islamic beliefs and Islamic medicine, and how the Islamic world brought a lot of the original classic ancient views of medicine into Europe, into medieval England and Britain. And in this video, we're going to look specifically at Islamic medicine. We're going to look at how the Islamic world preserved the ancient ideas that came about with Hippocrates and Galen. And then we're going to have a look at the new discoveries and the new ideas that were developed in the Islamic world. Okay? And how these ideas began to question the ideas of Galen. So we're going to start with the preservation of Islamic ideas. Like I said in the last few videos, all of the ancient works and ancient medicine was lost during the fall of the Roman Empire. So Hippocrates and Galen, their influence and their popularity had to come about again using a rediscovery and a translation of their work into different languages. And that's what happened in the 9th century when Humayun ibn Ishaq collected classical texts from all around the sort of Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire to translate them into Arabic. Okay? So from ancient Greek to Arabic. So that's what he began to do. Okay? And so these works, these classical works, came into Arabic and thrived in the Islamic world thanks to him. But then they came to Europe thanks to Ibn Sina, who brought them into Europe, and he was around roughly between the years 980 AD to 1037. So at the real start of the medieval period, okay? He was also responsible for creating the Canon of Medicine. Okay, the Canon of Medicine, which incorporated the ideas of Galen and Hippocrates and put it all into one place. So you don't forget, in the last video we talked about Hippocrates and Galen. They were around, there was a few hundred years gap in their lives. So Hippocrates was around a few hundred years before Galen, but this Canon of Medicine brought the work of Galen and Hippocrates together. So brought, I'm going to say H for Hippocrates and Galen, G for Galen, together. Their works, okay? So brought the works. Put works up here. Right. So it was very important for that to happen, because then their works are incorporated into one big collection that can be studied and translated into Latin. Okay. And there was also a more of an influence and interest in Islamic medicine when the Crusades began. The Crusades were a period of holy wars. So I'm just going to write holy wars. Oopsie daisy. Holy wars. And a holy war is literally a war almost ordered by God, where the Catholic and the Christian Europe waged war on the Islamic world, okay? And there were a number of them. It's argued that there were up to at least 8 crusades. However, the first 3, 4 or 5, shall we say, are the most important. And it's what really incorporated Islamic culture with Europe a little bit more, okay? And the Crusades came about because the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, which was a Christian empire, was seeking help from the Catholic Church, from the Pope, because of the amount of the spread of Islam around that area. Okay. So now we've talked about the preservation of ancient ideas. Let's have a look at the new discoveries that were made by the Islamic world. Okay. Now, there are a number of relatively modern ideas that came about in the Islamic world. For a start, a man named Abu al-Qassam in around AD 936, okay, wrote a book that described a number of quite modern medical treatments. So amputations was one, the removal of bladder stones. He also did quite a lot in dentistry. And there was also works on how to stitch wounds and all these different things. I'll write them in a little list here. So we've got amputations, stitching wounds. We've also got removing bladder stones, and dental work. All very modern, natural, so all very modern ideas, very modern, natural ideas that were around as early as 936 in the Islamic world. And then in the 12th century, we have Ibn Zuhr, who described the idea of a parasite causing a disease, okay? And this was where we start to see a questioning of Galen's work, okay? Because as you know, Galen was almost seen as an influential, correct, it was almost taken as gospel, as correct, his work. And the more Islamic medicine began to develop, the more we started to see a little bit of questioning of these ideas. Okay, and this also came into effect in the 13th century, a century later, when a man named Ibn al-Nafis questioned Galen again for his belief that blood flows from one side of the heart to the other via the lungs. Okay, now this is obviously an incorrect proposition. However, was still, if we compare it to what is actually true, was relatively modern at the time compared to other discoveries. Okay. Now there is one really important thing that happened in the Islamic world, and it's the idea of creating new drugs. Okay, the development of new drugs. So this really started an introduction into the study of chemistry, and it started through alchemy. Now, alchemy is simply the belief that you can turn metals into gold. That's one of the things that you can do. You can turn one kind of element into a different kind of element. And there's a lot of superstition and different rituals behind it that was believed up to even as far as the work of Newton. Isaac Newton used to believe and practice alchemy as well. And it traces all the way back to ancient Egypt, okay, so thousands and thousands of years before even the period of the Islamic world now, in as we're talking about it, okay. And despite not being able to turn metals into gold, or turn one kind of element into a different kind of element, or anything like that, they were able to develop some useful chemistry techniques, so that will be used in the future to create drugs, to create new drugs to help with medicine. So one such technique was distillation, which you should do in your chemistry class. So distillation was one such kind of thing that they developed using alchemy. So for example, this kind of chemical analysis, this kind of chemistry technique was used for the purpose of alchemy. So they didn't know that this would become a useful chemistry technique. They thought that this would help with alchemy. Obviously it didn't, but it was as a way that in the future would create new drugs, and it started here in the Islamic world through the practice of alchemy. So altogether there are a number of Islamic names that Islamic people that need to be looked into. So the people that, one, spread the ideas of the ancient world into the into Islamic world itself, and then into modern Europe from there. So we have the ancient ideas of Galen and Hippocrates that was only preserved through the Islamic world and Islamic medicine, okay? And it only came to medieval Europe because of that, okay? And then there were a number of new discoveries throughout the Islamic world, throughout the centuries that followed, including chemistry techniques that would be later used to help create drugs that was used in the study of alchemy.